Good afternoon, Year 12. Welcome back to Theory. We are chugging through. So where we are now, we are moving on to kind of some debates in sociological theory. So we've gone through the main essence of theory. So functionalism, Marxism, social action, feminism, postmodernism. Now we're looking at some of the issues. And these are kind of questions that have been asked in sociology. These aren't recently added to the spec in 2015. They're quite interesting and they come up quite a bit actually, looking at some of the past questions. What I have done that I gave my year 13s last year, and I'll give to you when we get to the revision stage, is every question that's been asked, what the marks were for it, areas that potentially haven't come up. Not that they are. Sometimes they give us an idea as to what the chief examiners thinking when they come to writing the questions. But if anything, it's just to give you an idea as to sometimes what they favour. And they do like some of these questions, wider questions in sociology. So one thing that I haven't been doing then that's really important is talking about interleaving old content. So psychologists, I said this on some previous lessons, but it is still paramount that you are going over old stuff. I know at the moment it's insane because you're trying to learn something new, teach yourself something new, and then I'm asking you to also revisit old content from family, from methods, but it's so important just because we haven't been told, exam boards haven't been told what's going to happen next year with your exams, whether or not they're going to take modules out or if they're going to make you just sit a couple of papers. We don't know. So at the time being, we're working on the premise that you are sitting 3 papers next May and June to get your full A levels. So we need to make sure that we are going over that previous content. And some of the best ways to do this, I've seen some of the revision that you've done, is just to refresh yourself, quiz yourself, go back and plan questions. Once you've got all your learning out the way for the week, we're saying you should try be doing 2-3 extra hours each subject on independent time, just like you would if you were in school. So try and fit that into your weekly schedule and see if you can revisit some of that older stuff. I've completely forgot to put recap quizzes onto the theory until just now. So I have got some questions on here that you can test yourself. You can, pause this, think about what the answer might be, and then compare it to the answers in a minute. But I'm trying to do it from each of the things that we've looked at so far. So from education, what is the 11+ examination? Name one way that postmen suggest that childhood is disappearing. From family. The difference between official and unofficial statistics, so our research methods, and then what is a meta-narrative from theory. Okay, so you can pause this now, have a go at answering those. And then I've got the answers here. This could be where you guide some of your independent time. So I was like, oh my God, I have no idea who postman is. Go back over to family and have a look at some of those notes. I can, on the VLE, obviously all the lessons are on there. I will double check that today to make sure that they are all up to date and on there. If there aren't any, email me, or if you want anything specific, also email me and I can send them out. So here is the answers to those. And then hopefully that can guide some of your revision. I'll try and do those for the remaining theory lessons that we have, which isn't many. Oh my goodness, we have chugged through this at quite a fast rate. And I'm a little apprehensive because if we are off until September, I'm apprehensive to start you on crime. I might give you some sort of taster aspects of crime, but I don't really want to. I'll think about it, basically. I'll have a think. It might be a few research tasks that I ask you to do, sort of July time. We'll see. So today then, our main question, I'll come back to that, is this: sociology as a science. So can we view sociology to be scientific? Okay, so this is where we are. We did all the method stuff at the start of year 12. We've looked at all our main theories in sociology. We've looked at the idea of modernity and post-modernity, and this is where we are now. So we're going to leave relationships till last and move on to value freedom after this, and then social policy, finishing with tying it all together, looking at the relationship. So here, we need to see how some people view sociology to be a scientific discipline and why some people go against it. So we need to hark back to research methods and thinking about these two concepts that we looked at right at the start of year 12. So positivism and interpretivism. So what is the difference between the two? Okay, so you can either pause this and make yourself a list, that would be nice, or you can think about it or refresh yourself. Do as you see fit. Okay, so what is the difference between these two concepts? It can be different theorists and what they believe about it, research methods that they use, but what are they? And then I will tell you. But the problem with these is I want to give you time to go away and practice tasks. I don't want you to just be rote copying down because you won't learn anything. So you've got to take some time to actually physically pause this, do the work, and then come back. Otherwise, they are redundant, basically. So our difference, positivism and interpretivism. So if we think about it in terms of theories, we've got our positivist, our functionalist, our Marxists, and our feminists. They are positivist theories. Okay, so what that means is they are trying to be scientific. They're trying to have the most scientific way of working. So the methods that they use are typically quantitative data, typically lab experiments or structured ways of doing things, rather than our interpretivists, which are our social action theories. Weber comes here, Bloomer, Cooley, Mead. So these are all about qualitative, rich detail. Now, they give us a higher level of validity because they are in the moment, they are getting real good insight, but they lack reliability because they're not necessarily consistent. Whereas our positivists maybe lack insight and lack validity, but they are more reliable, so they're more consistent. Okay, so the strengths of one is the weakness of the other, basically. So our interpreters love qualitative methods like observations and unstructured interviews, and they are argued to be non-scientific, whereas positivists are aimed to be scientific. Okay, so how that comes into play here is we have a big debate here where we've got several key questions and arguments that this debate puts forward. So this kind of gets a little bit philosophical, actually, and you start thinking about thinking, which is mind-blowing. So what is scientific thought and what methodology does it involve? So what actually is science? Whoa, man, totally deep. The argument that it's not possible for sociology to be a science is posed by this debate. Questions over the extent to which science itself is scientific. How do we know that science is science? Wow. And changing views on scientific thought and research today. So over time, science is changing. How do we know what's scientific and what isn't? And can sociology fit into that scientific paradigm? Well, let's delve in, shall we? So ultimately, at the end of this, what I want you to do is answer this question. Now, it's entirely up to you. I've got a model answer at the end of the PowerPoint, which I don't want you to look at until you've answered it. So a lot of this comes down to a high level of trust that you actually will practice and not have your notes and use time conditions, because the only person that you're letting down is yourself, because you'll end up with a terrible mark because you've used all your notes, basically. So outline and explain two arguments against the view that sociology is a science. So outline and explain, we've got 10 marks here. So we've got 5, 3, 2, 5 for knowledge, 3 for application, and 2 for evaluation. So outline and explain 2 arguments against. So, well, actually, no, I'll show you this. This is the mark scheme for this question. And we can already start to think about ways in which sociology isn't a science, because of all the things I mentioned earlier from the interpretivist view, because the focus is on people in society and trying to delve into those interpretivist ways of looking at individuals. That makes it not scientific because you can't measure it, you can't test it. Okay, so that's basically some of the things that are on this mark scheme here, but we'll come back to that at the end. So one of those first debates then, what is scientific thought and what methodology does it involve? So we have this idealized view of science that it has the following characteristics. So science seeks to establish social facts. It looks for cause and effect. It wants to be objective, so measurable. It claims to verify or check results. And to have these social facts, we need to have empirical, scientific, observable, measurable evidence. Okay, so empiricism just means testable. Okay, so we need to be able to replicate it, see it in other situations in order for something to be scientific. Okay, so we're kind of delving into, the philosophical debate of science here. How lovely. So empirical evidence, anything that's observable and testable. Now, I want you to have a think about this yourself. You can discuss it with your dog or cat or whoever's at home. Can sociological research be fully objective? So can we ever have sociological research that is scientific? What issues have we got? Because we do use lab experiments in sociology. They are one of the most scientific ways of measuring behaviour. But what issues might we have with using experiments? And psychologists, you should be able to pick this up from research methods. The rest of you, think about it carefully. You're in a space that's unusual, you're being watched. What's going to happen? Okay, so our main issues with experiments are that they're not true to life. And we may get some social desirability bias. People might change the way they act because they're being observed, they're being watched, which makes, it's very, it's not valid. We can see cause and effect, which makes it scientific, but there's lots of other factors that mean that actually, are we viewing what we think we're viewing? So our second debate here, the argument that it is possible and desirable for sociology to be a science. So people putting forward, it's possible that sociology can be viewed as scientific. So if we look at sociology and we split it into positivist and interpretivists, we have got positivist views which sees sociology as the study of social facts. Facts being the key for our positivists. Now, when we come to look at the relationship between theory and methods, I'm going to introduce to you some new studies, and you've also got from that bank from research methods a list of research that you can use with each scientific method. And I'm really struggling how to deliver that. I need to have a think. But Durkheim, so our functionalist, also carried out a lot of studies one big study into suicide, a comparative study. And his view was that it is possible for sociology to be a science. So he is a positivist. So we can be as objective as possible, but we have to take time to carefully plan our research. If you are a positivist like Durkheim, you're assuming that behaviour is shaped by social forces and therefore we can observe it. So people's interactions in society, we can actually observe that, so surely it's measurable. But people are constantly, if you're being observed, you're being watched, of course you're going to change your behaviour, so it's not valid. Positivists argue that they should use quantitative methods which rely on empirical evidence. So we should be using things that we can quantify. And that cause and effect should be established, making it possible to establish correlations. Now, a lot of correlations we have in society. One at the moment is that ethnic minorities are suffering more from the coronavirus, so they are more susceptible to developing the coronavirus. Now, that is a correlation between two things, that there's always going to be a third factor, okay? But sociology loves a correlation, which can be a problem because it's not necessarily accurate. Flip side of that, there is no way that sociology could be a science. These are our interpretivists, our social action theorists. So humans aren't passive, they've got free will, they have choice. Remember, Beck is all about choice. Therefore, how can we study them as objects? Because people are constantly changing and are unpredictable. People make decisions on how they interpret the world around them. This is a very social action perspective here. You know, the way they attach meaning to things. We've got labelling theory, the looking glass self. All of these things mean that people's meanings change and are subjective. Should we leave that? And they're all about qualitative research methods. So remember, we looked at Weber and Verstehen. So his idea is that we are more empathetic. We see the world through the eyes of those who we are researching. Quite a lot of time we've got covert observations happening. People are actively getting involved in the research. They love that, but then it loses its scientific value because they go native and maybe they forget what they are studying, or they just become part of that. So the Glasgow Gang is a really good one. I think it's in the textbook. If not, have a look at it. Totally getting involved in the way of life, which means that you're losing scientific value. Or you've got the tea room study where looking at gay men and who did that? Oh, I can't remember. But totally getting encapsulated and not having time to go and write your notes. Science goes out the window. And then our philosophical debate. So questions over the extent to which science is actually scientific. So has been a few questions over the past 10, 20 years as to what is science? What is scientific about science? So scientists make assumptions. They allow themselves to be influenced by external factors like companies. So at the minute, if we take the coronavirus as an example, we've got companies or universities and the government putting pressure on these universities to find a vaccine. So that pressure potentially is impacting on their own perception of what is right and wrong. So they have to prove their product to be effective in order to get sales, to actually make a living. And it could be they also want to further their own careers, but they have to avoid certain areas because the money's not there, the funding's not there. So is that scientific or is that being misguided? Take an example here, so a lovely bit of AO2 for this. You probably heard about it already, the thalidomide scandal. So they created, they had the drug thalidomide. It was tested to prevent sickness in pregnant women. But when they took the medication, it ended up with babies being deformed. And a whole massive scandal erupted over it. But the scientists claim they were following the safety advice, the rules were being followed, but this still took place. So there is a lot of pressure, I think, for certain companies to make things the best way they can, but maybe they're not following the advice as possible. Okay, so that's very philosophical, but quite an interesting debate to look at here. So what I have attached is a little gap fill highlighting how it can be seen scientific, how they cannot, and some other viewpoints for you to have a look at. So pause that and have a go at that now. Just a little bit of a practice there, because I want you to be practicing instead of just passively writing notes. Have a go at actually making sure you fully understand it. You could talk to yourself about it. You could record it so that you have an audio an audio file of the lesson. That's a good idea. I used to do that at uni and listen to it. Then the sound of my voice made me fall asleep very instantly. But it's good to have that there if that's how you learn. Okay, so getting on to some of the key sociologists in this area. Starting with Popper, Karl Popper. He comes up in psychology as well. He's a prominent social scientist. Now, Popper has the viewpoint that in order for sociology to be viewed as a science, then we need this idea of a deductive method. What a deductive method is basically once a scientist has a hypothesis, so a prediction, once they test that, it should continue to be tested and retested over and over again. In different situations, with different people, different places. And if the results are clear and confirmed, then we have a law or a social fact. So research should then, so once that's been tested and retested, researchers who come along should attempt to falsify this. Now, falsify, what that means is to prove an idea wrong. Prove an idea wrong sounds crazy, but it's the only way to ensure something is reliable. Now, these social facts that maybe a hypothesis has confirmed is different over time and may not remain the same. Oh, that's my doorbell. Excuse me a minute. I've got a delivery. Professionalism at its finest there. So, Popper, deductive method. Once a scientist tests, it has to be continually tested and retested, and other researchers have to falsify this. So they have to try and test it to prove it to be wrong. Okay, now that's a crazy concept to get your head around. Google falsification if that really doesn't make much sense. Okay, it's quite a difficult concept. So if we take aspects of sociology, which are unfalsifiable, which can we not test? So how can I think of a good example? Which areas are quite difficult to continually measure because they change over time, all of the time? And then how could that impact on sociology being viewed as scientific? Okay, so have a think about that. And I have got some examples I'll share with you at the end. A second key sociologist here. So for sociology being viewed as a science, you need to talk about both of these key sociologists. This is Thomas Kuhn. Now, Kuhn also comes up in psychology as well. And he's saying that normal science, or the science that we know, that actually occurs, exists within a framework called a paradigm. Hang on, let me get all this. So a paradigm, so many new concepts. A paradigm is a framework of concepts within a particular subject that shape the way that sociologists do their research. Okay, and I've got some examples to make a little bit more sense. So the paradigm that a scientist works within will shape how they approach it. So over time, challenging evidence against a concept means that we have a scientific revolution. So something like the world being viewed as flat, let's take that. Over time, we've got new evidence that says actually it's round, because it is round. And then challenging evidence against that means we have a massive revolution, a scientific revolution, which changes the paradigm. So let's take the paradigm to be a set of ideas so let's say, gravity is a paradigm. We haven't had any challenging evidence to go against it doesn't exist yet. If we did, we have a scientific revolution, which changes what we know the paradigm of gravity to be. So because of these ideas, Kuhn says that sociology, same as psychology actually, is pre-paradigmatic. Because we have so many competing ideas, whereas social science has so many different explanations for different things, that we cannot be viewed as scientific, okay? Because there is never a one-size-fits-all in sociology. So an example here, so I spoke about gravity. Newton discovering gravity, Einstein made his general theory of relativity. These major discoveries changed the way that scientists thought, and over time we had a paradigm shift. So what we thought to be true changed because of this new evidence. I hope that makes some kind of sense. Talk yourself through it. What is paradigmatic? Think about some sociological evidence to suggest that we've got lots of competing ideas to explain one thing. Okay, moving on to our changing views of science. So how has science changed and emerged over time? So we have this new theorist or theories put forward, and we look at these in crime as well. Realist views. Now, a realist view of science says that, okay, the natural science, so biology, chemistry, physics, they're useful and we need them, but social sciences are desirable and possible. And there has been a massive influx on the prominence of social sciences to guide a load of things in society. So when we come on to social policy at the end, absolutely fascinating. I love social policy. I think I should have also taught politics, really interesting. Sociology guides a lot of social policy that we, live by day by day. So this realist view says that, or Bashka is one of our key sociologists here, argues that science uncovers structures and mechanisms that are the same in society. So functionalists say that we've got big structural forces, the government, education, law and order, that shape our behaviour. And Sayer says that science is actually an open and closed systems. We can't control all the variables, predictions cannot be made, meaning that these closed systems are things like labs, where variables are controlled. Our realists, Bashka and Sayer, are saying that it's possible to use open systems to explain underlying social causes of human behaviour. Okay, so how can I frame that in a different way? So social science is an open system where we can't control every single variable all of the time. Closed systems are scientific, where we can measure things, variables are controlled, like in labs. But our realists are saying that the open systems, we have a way of we can find some underlying social causes of why people act the way they do. It's just, takes a lot of time to do, and it'll take a lot of research still. So it's possible, using those definitions, to say that sociology can be a science, do we think? Is there any way? Oakley is very critical of the way science operates. It's a male stream, so it's created by men for men, and attempts to use what we know from men to apply it to women, of course. This is key here for this section, Sociology as a Science, is to look through what we've looked at so far and try and create those synoptic links, which researchers would fit into a positivist and an interpretist view. Okay, so like everything in theory, it's all about synoptic links. It's all about contemporary research. So how can we use education and family and what we know about our theorists to apply it to sociology being a science? Postmodernists, very critical of science. Those big set of answers for certain concepts are not appropriate anymore in society. Beck, saying that we have man-made things are affecting us more. It's not always managed social problems. We know we have other risks to us, like global warming, maybe because of science. So our theorists are totally against, or some of them are totally against it being a science. Some of them are totally for it being a science. So back to that question. Outline, explain 2 arguments against the view. So here, we'd be looking at our interpretivists. Okay, so indicative content that you could talk about. Human action as the product of free will versus science as causal explanations. I wouldn't do that one actually. Empathetic methods of interpretivism, so Verstehen from Weber versus, lab experiments, natural sciences. The 2 that I've underlined here, are the 2 that I go for. So ethical and practical difficulties of using empirical scientific methods, lack of a unified paradigm, so Kuhn, but you could talk about Popper. Interpretivist sociologists, very subjective. So I would have a go at planning this. Maybe you could use the mark scheme to help with your plan. 2 arguments against the view that it is viewed as a science. So you can do it like this. You can look at interpretivism versus positivism in one paragraph, and then you could look at Kuhn, pre-science, pre-paradigm in another, or whichever 2 you think you understand best and think you could most about. And then I have a model answer on there for you to look at. You can either create your plan using this or from this, or entirely up to you, and then compare your answer after. Okay, if you're really stuck and want to send it to me, you can also do that. It is a tricky section, and I am going to set you a 20 marker on it because I think it's one of those sections that, because students hate it so much, they love to bring in. We have to be mindful of that. So do your best and let me know how you get on.